George Groves stops David Brophy in the 4th round. Now, some people are going to say I'm being a bit harsh on Groves. George Groves himself, in the post-fight interview, accused people like me of being haters, guys who just want to see him fail. He basically said that if you think that he's deteriorated, you're a hater. So our opinions are invalid, George. We're not, it's impossible for us to be objective. I've got no reason to be a hater of George Groves. I've always liked George Groves. I've always felt that he's very talented. But it's not just me, and it's got nothing to do with hate when I say that I can notice a decline in George Groves. I can notice a regression in George Groves as a fighter since that rematch with Carl Froch. I'm not the only one, and it ain't got nothing to do with hate. This is just what I see. And it continues, in my opinion, in this David Brophy fight. Yeah, he beat Brophy, but the sharpness that George Groves used to have, I didn't see anymore. His style is continuing to change under Shane McGuigan. The way he's holding his hands, his stance, and all that type of stuff is still quite different than it was when he was with Adam Booth. He doesn't have his left hand down as much. He holds it a lot higher. Throws his punches slightly differently. He's still not straightening up the right hand the way I'd like to see him straighten it. He still kind of throws it around the side all the time. And as I say many times, there's a time and a place for all types of different punches, round the guard punches, straight punches and whatnot. But I feel like George Groves is not throwing his right hand straight enough in his past few fights. I'd like to see him throw it much straighter. Regardless of that, as I say, I think the snap has gone from George Groves. He ended up finishing Brophy with a body shot. Brophy was totally overmatched in this fight. Let's not get it confused. He's a domestic level fighter, not a particularly great domestic level fighter. He was overmatched. Groves finished him with a body shot, but prior to that, he wasn't throwing enough body shots, in my opinion. If you go back and look at George Groves' early career, when he was under Adam Booth, I'm talking about even before the fight against that other Scottish guy who dropped Groves. His name escapes me at the moment. Kenny Anderson. Even before he fought Kenny Anderson, go look how fast Groves was. Go look how sharp he was in those fights. Look at the body shots he was ringing off against people like Charles Adamu. Combinations to the body. He was just full of life, Groves, back then. He had so much spring in his step. And he brought that type of youthful exuberance to the first Carl Froch fight. Since that first fight, I mean, the second fight he tried to fight a more conservative fight from a strategic point of view. So I'm going to discount that one slightly. But certainly from the rematch onwards, or after the rematch onwards, that same youthful exuberance that George Groves used to have is gone. I haven't seen it in any of his fights since then. And that is alarming. I've been over this before. I think it's more psychological than physical. Groves seems to believe that there is nothing wrong. There's nothing missing from him. There's nothing missing from his performances. All right, everybody's entitled to their own opinions. And boxers don't become successful most of the time by listening to critics and listening to people like me. They don't. Because, well, I say there's different types of criticism. There's constructive criticism, and then there's people who say you'll never amount to anything. And I'm not saying George Groves will never amount to anything. All right, let me just make that clear. But if you listen to people who say you will never amount to anything, as a boxer, you're never going to get anywhere, because most boxers have got those type of naysayers. Particularly now in the age of social media, from very early on, you're going to have people saying you'll never get anywhere, you're garbage, you're rubbish, you're this, that, and the other. If boxers listen to that type of stuff and take it on board, they'll never get anywhere. Boxers have to be somewhat ignorant to other people's opinions. They have to be somewhat stubborn and hard-headed. And you can see that in George Groves. You can see the stubbornness and the hard-headedness and the self-belief, which, you know, there's a thin line between self-belief and self-delusion a lot of the time. And I've talked about this before. George Groves, in my opinion, is walking that thin line, and he's more on the self-delusion side at the moment. I wish the best for him, and I would love to see a return of the old George Groves. I really would. I think that would be a great re-addition to the super middleweight division at world level. But I just don't see it, man. I hope he's still got it in the locker. I hope he can show people like me that he still is the same old George Groves from the first Carl Froch fight and before that. I hope he can show me that. But at this point in time, I don't have much hope for it. He's talking about fighting Martin Murray and Callum Smith, a rematch with James DeGale. At this point in time, I see all those guys. Actually, no. I see Smith and DeGale beating him. I think he could probably still beat Murray. Murray, not a big puncher, strong guy, fairly basic. It may be a very competitive fight, but I'd probably edge towards Groves beating Murray. But in terms of Callum Smith, I would stay well away if I was George Groves. Although knowing the heart that George Groves has got, because George Groves is a warrior. This guy's not a coward, people. He is a warrior, and he'll try arrange that fight with Callum Smith. It's kind of unfortunate, really, that Arthur Abraham has just lost his world title. Unfortunate from George Groves' perspective anyway, or the perspective of someone who's a George Groves fan. You should be, you know, disappointed that Abraham's lost his title, because that was the easiest route for George Groves to win a world title, in my opinion. This guy who's just beat Abraham over in the States, Ramirez, that's going to be a much tougher fight for George Groves than Abraham was. Abraham was an old guy coming to the end of his career, been in a lot of tough battles. He's a fairly rudimentary fighter, Abraham. Fairly low volume. And him and George Groves are promoted by the Sauerlands both. So it would have been a fairly easy fight to set up. Unfortunately, that opportunity is gone now. And George Groves is going to have to go through much tougher opposition to be able to pick up a belt. Will George Groves ever be a world champion? You drop your comments in the comment section below and let me know what you feel about that. Can George Groves beat Martin Murray, Callum Smith, or James DeGale? Can he win a rematch with Badu Jack? That's what I'd like to know from you guys. Let me know what you felt about the performance. Am I being too harsh? Do you think George Groves has actually improved? Do you think maybe George Groves needs to feel a threat to bring the best out of him? Maybe he needs to feel threatened before he's going to be sharp. Or as sharp as he used to be. I can't help thinking, even go back to the Paul Smith fight. Groves got tagged in that fight at the end of the first round. But he was so sharp against Paul Smith with his punches. Remember that right hand that took Smith out? That was a wicked shot. He was very sharp back then. I just don't see the same sharpness anymore. A lot of people have said they don't see the same punching power anymore. Leave your comments below. Let me know how you feel, people. It's your boy Hatman. I'm out.